So this past week, middle of the weekish, I met a guy named Bob. I'd never crossed paths with this guy Bob before, and it's not really the place you want to be when you're going to meet somebody. I was kind of in the waiting area of a car repair shop, and like that's not where anybody like signs up to go, right? But I was dropping off my car, and I was waiting because in just 2 or 3 minutes, Pastor Derek was actually going to pick me up and bring me into the office, and this guy, Bob, he just strikes up this conversation with me. Just a fascinating guy. And Bob is an inventor, and so he was telling us about some inventions and things like that, and he's telling me about different things he's done. He's showing me websites for these inventions he has and companies that use his inventions. Just fascinating, because I can't invent anything. And so like when I meet somebody who's an inventor, I'm just like, that just captures my attention. One of the things after we got a little bit of that conversation Bob got talking about was he has family that lives literally all over the country. He has these 4 boys, and they are about as spread out as you can get. And he starts talking about his boys, and then he starts talking about his grandkids. He's got all these grandkids. And he gets going about his grandkids, and Bob just, his enthusiasm goes up another level. He starts talking about his grandkids, right? And he starts talking about, he says, well, this one, that's not, man, I think really, I think he's really going to be about 6'8", like his dad's 6'5" or so, and he's bigger than everybody else, and he's going to be 6'8". This one probably over here, he's only going to be about 6'6", and I'm like, I don't usually hear the word only with 6'6" used, but that's what Bob was thinking in the moment, right? Like, he's only going to be about 6'6", and he's talking about it, and he's going to be this fast, and he's already playing this sport, he's already doing this thing, and he is revved up, right? He is revved up talking about this. And I'm listening, man, and he's great for an introvert because he's doing the talking, right? And all I got to do is listen, and it's great. And I was so captured by it in part because really what Bob was so excited about with his grandkids, like, was their potential. Like, he was talking about their potential. You know, they're in middle school right now, right? They're going to be 6'6", 6'8", right? He's talking about their potential. And I love it, right? I love it. And some things with potential, you can't really do anything about it. You're just guessing, really. Like, if you're going to be 6'8", you're going to be 6'8". But if you're going to be 5'8", you're going to be 5'8", right? You know, like, hey, I'm only 5'8". I really didn't live up to my height potential. You know, nobody says that, right? Nobody says, man, if I would have done better, I wouldn't have had to be 6'6". I could have been 5'10". Okay? You don't say that, right? Because you don't really get to control that potential. But there's this whole other, like, parts of life where you have this potential and you get to influence it. Like, you get to influence. Like, we have a certain relationship potential. Like, oh, what could this relationship be? And what will I invest in? Who will I be as a relational person? Like, what will that look like? Oh, I've clearly got this skill or this talent, and I can paint, or I can write, or I can run really well. And I don't know who really wants to run a 10K to get to the Dutton food basket, but that sounds like something Joel would say. Yeah, you runners, all the runners just got excited, right? I know, yeah. I would drive there. You pure runners would still beat us, okay? But it's like this potential. You can become a better runner. You can become a better painter. You could become a better friend, right? We have these things. It's like, oh man, potential could really actually be helpful for me here. Like, it's good to dream about what it could be. And in so many ways, that's what Jesus is talking about in this teaching we've been like listening in with him on over the last few weeks, called the Sermon on the Mount. It's his longest recorded teaching. He's teaching his disciples and some other people. And really what he's doing over and over and over and over again is saying, look, I want you to see the potential. I want you to see the potential of your life with me. I want you to see the potential of your collective, like all of you together, your life with me. I want you to see the potential of what could happen when my kingdom comes and my will is really experienced on this earth. And you got to remember, he's talking to them in a really divided, hostile time. The people he's talking to are under like Roman oppression, and they're not really loving that much. They've got dreams of something else. There's a lot of religious tension and conflict in the region at the time. It sounds a lot like today. And in the middle of all that, Jesus just keeps pushing like all of this hope and all of this potential in their direction. And today we're going to look at like another layer, because now he's talked about, look, here are the heart attitudes you could have. I know it feels like the world around you has a different heart attitude, and I know left to your own devices, it feels like maybe you don't like what you find inside of yourself sometimes, but I want to give you I want to just help you know what your potential heart condition is. I want you to really get an understanding of what life with me could look like in conversation and in things like fasting and what you do with your dollars and how you could get rid of some of that pressure. And I want you to understand that there really is a potential that you could live your life without worry and without anxiety. You really could do that. Jesus is painting this incredible picture. And today we're going to be in Matthew chapter 7. I want to invite you just to find a Bible, phone, whatever you got to do to kind of get there. Matthew chapter 7. And Jesus is going to talk here about something it's really needed. Then people have to use the tool Jesus is going to talk about then, and we need to use the tool that Jesus is going to talk about now. But it's kind of a touchy word. It's a little bit dicey. So we're going to try and help each other as we navigate it a little bit today. In Matthew chapter 7, Jesus he's going to play out a couple helpful things for us. Today, we're going to look at maybe the first, half or so of Matthew chapter 7. Next week, we're going to really bring Jesus' whole teaching. We're just going to kind of get to the end of it, bring it to an end. And I want to just tell you ahead of time, I really hope, I know it's holiday weekend, whatever else, I really hope you'll get here. If you've got somebody in your life that you're like, man, we've been having some conversations about Jesus. We've been kind of going down this road, and there's just good trajectory and good openness there. I really want to encourage you to bring them. Next week, we'll just follow with Jesus, and as he brings this teaching to an end, he very clearly just lays out what you and I, what today he would look back and call the gospel. How is it people can walk into a relationship with him, and what does that actually mean? What does this dynamic of Jesus being Savior and at the very same time Lord mean? And Jesus really clearly laid it out, so we're going to do our best next week to really clearly lay it out as well and give each other a chance to move and respond in that. Matthew chapter 7. We're going to look at a little bit of a dicey word, okay? And just before we do, would you bow your heads and close your eyes? I want to just invite you to repeat after me a very simple prayer. You've probably heard a version of it before because we actually taught on it before. You've heard it at funerals or anything else, but just repeat this after me. We'll all do it together. Here we go. Our Father, who is in heaven and is with us, do whatever it takes today to make your kingdom come and to get your will done in us. Amen. Matthew chapter 7, here's the dicey word. The dicey word is Jesus is going to start talking about judging. He's going to actually start talking about what it looks like to judge other people. And that feels all sorts of I don't want to be a judge. I don't want to be judgy, and I don't want to be accused of being judgy, right? I get all of that because I don't really want to be accused of any of that either, right? And for some of us, that's why we have an aversion to church or even spiritual things, or I just feel judged, and that's a really judgy group, and I get it. And yet here it is that Jesus actually talks about it. And so to help us track with Jesus, let's just define what Jesus is talking about when he says judge here. So judge really means, just simply defines, it means to separate something. It means to separate something good from something bad. It means to separate what's the best from what's really good. It means how we distinguish things. How do we tell what one thing is versus another? Really, how do we evaluate? How do we evaluate? And we know, right, if you think back to this idea of potential, the way you reach your potential is you have to evaluate where you are now. Right? We really already judge a lot by, this is where I am. The way you work towards a retirement savings is you evaluate where you are now and where you want to be. The way you get a job is you evaluate where you are and where you want to be and what kind of job you think you might be good at, right? The way that you get married in our culture, which is largely absent of arranged marriages, the way you get married in our culture, right, is you evaluate, is that somebody I want to spend the rest of my life with, right? The way you form your friend group is almost subconsciously, you start evaluating, you start judging, who do I kind of click with? Who do I not click with? How does this all make sense, right? So we're doing it all of the time. So with a little bit of an open mind to this, let's just look in and let's see what Jesus says. Matthew chapter 7, let's look at the first couple of verses. Jesus says this, again, trying to help everybody live their potential with him. He says, judge not so that you won't be judged. For with the judgment, or in the way that you judge, with the judgment you pronounce, you will actually be judged back. And with the measure you use, that's how it will be measured to you. Again, the way you judge, that's how you're going to be judged. And again, Jesus seems to be like, man, this is careful. Like, you got to be careful when you judge. Like, don't get this thing wrong, which implies there's a way to actually get it right. Right? There's another place where Jesus, talking to a large group of people, John chapter 7, verse 24, he says this. There's a bunch of religious leaders around. He says this, hey, when you judge, judge correctly. When you judge correctly. So there's a way to judge incorrectly if Jesus is inviting us to judge correctly. And in Matthew chapter 7, he's like, hey, be careful with judging, because you don't, if you want to, you're going to get it back the way you give it. People talk about karma. That's a Jesus-shaped principle. You do reap what you sow, right? So it's like, there's a way to do this thing right. Well, how do we do it right? Well, that's what Jesus starts to unpack in the rest of this section. Let's read the next couple of verses. He says this, starting verse 3. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but don't notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there's this huge log in your own eye? You're a hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will be able to see clearly the speck in your brother's eye. We understand that's the definition of hypocrite, right? It's what we all hate with each other, right? It's what we all despise. How dare you tell me when you, right? I mean, we've all got that thing. It's interesting that Jesus talks about the eye. He uses the eye. When you think about it, the eye is just uber sensitive, is it not? You can get the littlest thing in your eye, and it can cause the greatest problems, right? You get an eyelash in there that's going the wrong way or something, right? If you wear contacts, if you ever get that contact like turned around or it flips back or it's in it's like, can somebody just take the eye out, please? Right? It's just not any fun. You've probably seen people, I know some people, they wear glasses and they really want to wear contacts, but they won't, because they can't even get themselves to touch their own eye. They're like, I can't do it, right? The eye is it's remarkably sensitive. So Jesus, he takes the most sensitive thing here and he says, look, it's tough. It's tough. It can bring some pain. It can be difficult. When I was a little kid, I was probably about 4 years old. I was with my grandparents one night, spent lots of time with them, and the phone rings, and it's my uncle, and he's calling from work. He was trying to leave his job at this factory that he worked at, and he's calling his dad, my grandpa, because his car won't start. So he's stuck in the middle of this enormous factory parking lot. Car won't start, doesn't really know what's wrong. And so my grandpa's going to go down, try and help him out, and he asked, do I want to go with him? I always wanted to be where he was, so I'm like, yeah, I'm in, let's go. And both of them were almost like heroic figures to me as a kid. And we go down there, and it's terrible. It's like the worst possible part of the year. It's like 5 or 6 o'clock at night. It's fall, so it's really dark. It's really windy. It's getting cold. There's debris and stuff blowing all over this wide open parking lot. There's no barriers or anything. And I'm 4 or 5 years old. I'm just standing there, right? I'm not actually going to fix the car, right? And they're trying to work on this thing, and they're trying to figure it out. And suddenly I realized something is in my eye. There's something in my eye. And I do what you would do, right? You rub your eye. Well, let's get it out, right? Let's start prying around in there and get that thing out. It doesn't really get out. It starts to feel worse. And so I actually go and I climb back into the front seat of my grandpa's truck, and I'm in there, and I'm just rubbing my eye and rubbing my eye and rubbing it. It doesn't get out. It just gets worse, and it gets worse. The pain's getting worse. Eventually, he comes over, says, what's up? And I try and tell him what's going on. Eventually, we leave. The car won't start. We go home, and they put some eye drops in there, and that doesn't really work. And some of you would remember when eye drops didn't work, there was a bigger thing with the eye drop thing. You get a little cup, and you could pour the solution in this little glass cup thing, and you just pour it in, just pour it in, right? So that's what's next, and that doesn't work. And it gets to the point I can't even really get my eye open anymore. And they call my mom. My mom comes over. Eventually, I end up in the hospital, like in the emergency room with them trying to get this thing out. And one of the most vivid things I remember from that night, one was the pain. The second one was being in the emergency rooms, like this 4 or 5-year-old. And I just remember the most piercing, bright light ever, right? Sitting in this chair in this big light. And I look back now and I'm like, oh, I totally see why people confess to things with bright lights on them, right? I totally get it now, right? I'm like, I'm not sure what hurts worse, whatever's in here or that light, right? And they started doing this stuff and using little strips and everything else. And what come to find out, what had actually gotten in my eye and kind of gotten around to the side was this really small piece of bark. So it's like a little small, jagged piece of bark that had blown off some tree somewhere, some old wooden telephone pole in this parking lot or whatever. And it was just so lodged in there. And they finally get this thing out. But here is the thing, like, as long as that was in me, and as long as that pain was that deep, right? As long as it was that intense, I was having trouble navigating through my grandparents' house, which I knew really well and which was really small. But I was having trouble navigating. I couldn't even really see. If they would have said to me, hey, can you walk over to that table and can you grab me a Kleenex? Can you bring me that back? That would have been a major challenge. Because in the end, it was the smallest thing, but it was like the equivalent of a huge log. It's just overbearing. It's just all-encompassing. And for me to really be functional again, for me to really operate at everything, for me to really get back to kind of the potential I could live with at that age, I just had to get rid of that thing. Had to get rid of it. And that's, Jesus is trying to say, look, let me tell you how to judge well. You're going to have to judge correctly. Let me tell you how you can judge others well. And the first thing he says is get the log out of your own eye. And so if you want to judge, there's a couple things. And one, if you want to judge somebody else because you're starting to see something good in them that could be better or whatever, well, first judge yourself. You got to judge yourself first, right? We do really have to say, hey, what would I evaluate in my own life right now? With the help of Jesus and embracing his teaching that he's telling me all about who I can be with him, and he has all this hope, and there's all this enthusiasm about what he's telling me. What would I evaluate in myself? And let me do that before I help anybody else. And could we just say, Jesus isn't talking about momentary things here. Jesus is talking far more about ways we live. It's like, hey, live being willing to just evaluate, where are you? What's good? Where are you missing me? Where are you ignoring me? Live just evaluating. In a hope-filled, potential realizing way, what's really happening? Jesus isn't painting a picture of, hey, evaluate yourself once, and from then you're good. You can pretty much tell everybody else how to live. It's not the standard. It's not the practice Jesus is setting out. Just would we live saying about ourselves, hey, just how am I? How am I? Second thing is, Jesus invites this judge, and there's this judge correctly, right? And remember, he said, be careful how you judge, because that's the way it's going to come back to you. So how about if we judge when we're at a place where we really want what's better for the other person? When we genuinely want what's better for the other person. It's funny, right? Because the people we most want to judge or evaluate or help them see themselves clearly are usually the people that have ticked us off in some way. Right? Oh yeah, I got something to say about that. And are we willing, would we approach it with this helpful evaluation because we really want what's best for somebody else? Just in full transparency. Just in full transparency. There have been times in my life where I could have been helpful. I could have offered helpful evaluation. I could have offered helpful questions. And I either couldn't do it at all, or I ruined the question. Because it wasn't just that I didn't want the best for somebody else, but I actually wanted them to fail. I I was either so mad or so hurt or so something that I actually wanted him to fail. And when you really want somebody to fail, you know what's true? You can say all the right things and completely destroy the conversation and have a negative impact on potential. So it's we judge ourselves, and part of judging ourselves, part of evaluating where are we, is just slowing down long enough to say, what do I really want for the person or the group of people that I have observations about or impassioned opinions about? Like, what do I really want? Will I go slow enough that I would judge correctly? Remember, Jesus didn't say never judge. Like, Jesus said do it correctly, so there's a value in it. Am I starting by seeing the potential? So we judge, like when we first have evaluated ourselves and done some, with the help of Jesus, done some separating of good and not so great and healthy and not so healthy. And when we are in a place where we say, I want the best for them. Man, I want the very, very best. I want them to know the full potential of Jesus. I want them to know that. And then there's some things we judge without. Let me give you a few of them, right? I got a lot of words here, but just 4 things that's really helpful if we will actually just make sure we're without these. Like if we'll just not have them, right? First one is just making assumptions. Don't make assumptions. We're better if we judge without assumptions. Long-distance mentor of mine who was here several years ago, a guy named Tim Elmore, he taught me this thing that when you got to enter a difficult conversation, always clarify before you confront. Always clarify before you confront. Always clarify before you confront. Don't assume anything. Let me clarify. Let me just make sure I even understand what's really happening here. Let me clarify before I confront. Just say, hey, I just noticed this. Is this true? Can you help me with this? Like, help me understand. Like, what's really happening here? We would do so well, like, instead of judging groups so quickly right now, if we could sit down with people from groups and clarify a lot of things before we assume anything. Just clarify before we confront or before we offer some type of evaluation. It helps us do it correctly. Don't slander anybody. Do it without slander. Do it without slander. There's never a reason. Is that for me? That's for me. I only said it because it's my friend Kathy. That's the only reason. Yeah. Is it for me? No. No. Okay, sorry. No. I wouldn't call anybody else out that except Kathy, but if you want to take this moment to make sure your phone's off, that's a good chance. Do it without slander. In this mode of evaluating, like pulling things apart and helping each other, we don't ever need to ruin a reputation. We don't ever need to ruin a reputation. Look, sometimes we might do something that ruins our reputation. We don't need the help of the person who is helping us. We don't need the help of the person who might be judging us, who might be helping evaluate. If the action is ruining the reputation, it's ruining the reputation. Let's not pile on. We don't need to ruin the reputation of whole groups, and we don't need to lump people into groups and ruin their reputation. We don't need to lump people inside of our relationships and inside of church dynamics. Let's just avoid that. It just never needs to be part of the equation. And if it is, it's this warning flag that we probably still have a really good-sized log in our own eye. There's still something in there just isn't right. We can do it without condemning. And we know, like, when we're condemning in this judging, evaluating thing, when we really start to identify the person as only the issue. I want to talk to you about this issue, and what we've really done in our mind is we've made them that issue. They're not a person anymore. They're a thing. They're a topic. They're a point of tension. Right? Isn't it funny that Jesus is talking about this judging correctly thing? Isn't it funny and also at the same time painful how relevant it still is? How much of our world is divided right now simply because people aren't people, people are issues. We look at people and we rail against an issue and forget it's a person. All the time. all the time. She's like, do it, judge correctly, like help evaluate, help the person, just for a little bit, forget about the issue, the dynamic, help the person. And then last, this one will be easy, right? But just do it without attempt to boost your own reputation, right? Let's be honest, sometimes it feels good to be the one who's got something right. I'd like to help you with that because I'm good there. It feels good. Don't act like it. Right? It just does, right? But there's like, wait a second, just like do this correctly. There are ways, like look at yourself first and measure all of that, and right? Really want the best for somebody. And when you do, make sure you carry in these types of things. Like, let's not slander. Let's not start with assumptions. Let's not condemn people and just make them some random issue. Let's be healthy in it. Jesus, that's part of what Jesus is getting at. Here's the thing. You've got people in your life you wish you could really help. And you've got people in your life who wish they could really help you. And part of how we get there is to understand those kind of dynamics of how to judge, how to evaluate, how to separate correctly. There actually is a life-giving way to do it. Jesus goes on. He keeps playing this thing out a little bit. Let's just pick it back up in verse 6. Do not give dogs what is holy, and don't throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn and attack you, which I think at first reading that makes complete sense to everybody, so we'll just skip it. Now, Jesus is basically saying, like, don't waste things. Don't waste things. That's why you check your motive first so you don't waste it. Evaluate other people's readiness so you don't waste it. Like there's good in what we're doing, so don't be careless with it. Verse 7, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks, they do end up finding, and to the one who knocks, it will be opened. Now, so often that little passage there is used by people to say, man, just if you keep praying for anything, if you keep looking for anything, if you keep knocking hard enough, eventually it's going to come. And there is a spiritual truth and principle in that. But what Jesus, like in the context of what Jesus is talking about, he's like, hey, when you're going to enter this evaluation thing, when you're going to enter this judging thing, do it with all sorts of help from Jesus. Ask and keep asking for discernment. Look for it. Be persistent with heaven to help you do. Like we say, God, please, is this right? Is the timing right? How's my heart in this? Help me see myself. Don't let me go with any logs in my eye. Like continue to purify my heart for that person. Help me see. God, help me see their potential. Like in the context of what Jesus is talking about, he's talking about it in the context of these relationships and how we help each other by offering Jesus-shaped evaluation. Ask, seek, and not, do it with a whole lot of help from Jesus. Let's pick it back up again, verse 9. Or which one of you, if his son asks him for bread, is going to give him a stone instead? Or if he asks for a fish, why would you ever give him a snake? If you then, you are evil, like without me, you are completely evil. If you know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more is your perfect heavenly Father who is in heaven, how much more is he going to give good things to those who ask him? So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is what sums up all the law and the prophets. This is the whole of what Jesus came to bring. It's just a reminder of Jesus, like, hey, when you want to go down this road, when you need to go down this road, when you need somebody to go down this road with you and judge something in you or help you evaluate something, you got to remember that inside of it, the Father has good things to bring you. Even in the hardest conversations, the Father is bringing you good things. Which means this, that sometimes those hard conversations, they do hurt, but they don't have to harm. They do hurt, but they don't have to bring harm. Because there's this Father who's trying to give good gifts. He's trying to bring it to the table. And we talk about it, and I can even feel it. Like there's this little little cringe in us, right? Like that's the words of Jesus. But do I really want to be judged? Like it's kind of a bad word, right? And here's all that Jesus is getting at in this thing. And in light of all that Jesus is teaching, here's all he's really getting at. Is this reminder and this invitation to judge the way you want to be judged. And listen, and we want to be judged because we want to be everything Jesus made us to be. We want to be judged. We want to be evaluated. We want people who genuinely love us and want the best for us. We want people who are genuinely in our corner. We want a Savior who is absolutely for us and believes that we can be the us He made us to be. We want to be judged because we want to be all Jesus made us to be. At the end of the day, whether we know it or not, you want to be judged. You want some people in your life who love you enough and handle your life with enough care and compassion and strength that they would help evaluate. And there are some people in your life who, whether they know it or not, they're counting on you to do the same. And you got to remember, again, Jesus is talking to a group of people. It's collective, friends. It's collective. Sometimes we, as the body of Jesus, his people, sometimes we need to be judged. We need to hear his evaluation because he sees the potential of who we could be. And why would we ever want to be a group of people that wouldn't live fully who God made us to be as a group of people? Why would we ever want to come up short in that? Why would we ever want to leave anything on the table there? Judge the way you want to be judged, lovingly and with patience and without condemnation and without slander and without assumptions, quick assumptions, and right? And without it coming from people who have the most overt logs ever in their eye that everybody sees but them, right? Yeah. Why wouldn't we? I want to show you a picture of an old car, kind of, two versions of this old car. I think you know, the bottom one's better than the top one, okay? But here's the thing about this old car. It's like a 1969 or 70 Ford Mustang, and it's not my car, by the way. You can see the top of that, and it's awful, right? I mean, it's rusted out, it's broken, it's missing things and whatever else. And the bottom's great. I mean, awesome. The bottom's cool. I'm not even a car guy. I think it's cool. Right? I mean, it's hard not to think that's cool, right? Do you know how it do you know how it got to the restored condition? You know how it got there? I mean, clearly some work, clearly some dollars, clearly some time, but also because somebody judged the old version. Somebody looked at the old version and saw all the rust and saw all the junk and the missing parts and thought, I think there's a lot of potential there. I think there's a lot of potential there. I think I'm going to do something about that. If nobody ever evaluates the old rusted out version, we don't ever get to look at the new and restored version. Right? We miss something there. I like it. It's because it is this reminder that, hey, look, sometimes you and I, we get some rusty, scraped up, dented, broken down, missing parts. It's part of life. It's even part of following Jesus. And if we really want to live fully, the full potential of this restored life with Jesus, if we really want to live that, we need some people who look and with a lot of love and with the ability to see a restored us and see the potential. They need to look at us and say, man, I think I'm going to talk to Jesus about it, but I think I could help there. I think Jesus might actually have me here to help. I think we could do that. We need people like that. We need people to see the top version of that in us and not run the other way and not think it costs too much, it's too much of a pain, too much of a hassle, and not have time. We need somebody to look at us and see a little bit of the rust and see a little bit of the brokenness and say, I'm glad when people see me like that, somebody engages. And so, I'm going to be a person that engages. And we need to be like that. We need to receive the engagement. Like we need to receive the work. We need to receive the evaluation. We need to receive the scraping, right? And the ripping of things apart and the putting of things back together. Like, is there a spot in your life that you'd even say, I wish somebody would help me here? I've tried. I don't really see the way forward. I don't really see how this part of my life gets transformed. I wish somebody would help me. Is there somebody in your life who you've known it, but you've been a little nervous, a little scared, but you know you love them. You know you're for them. And you're not even really motivated by anger. You're motivated by how much your heart hurts for them and how much your heart wants for them. And you know that they trust how you love them. But you haven't wanted to be judgy, so you're like, I'm not going to do that. Maybe it's time. Like, what would it look like this week to just start with, hey, Jesus, would you just help me evaluate me? Help me see me the way you see me. And let's start there. And then, Jesus, if there's anybody in my life you've got to help me with that, I want to be open. And if there's anybody in life you want to use me in that, I want to be open. It's super simple, but a little scary and unnerving at the same time.